Welcome to part 5 of my Hunnic Empire campaign and 25-year challenge. Devastated and almost wiped out, the Huns dared a last attack on the Eastern Roman Empire and managed to conquer Constantinople. Now it will become clear whether the Huns are able to defend their new territories. And so welcome to Crusader Kings 3, The Fallen Eagle. The empire had several Roman revolts and had to concentrate on holding the territory it had conquered. Slowly but surely, the rebels were beaten back, and a little more peace and order was brought to the empire. At the same time, the Spanish Empire conquered Italy and was now on a good way to restore the Western Roman Empire. In the following years, the Huns made new attempts to reconquer former territories of their empire. But the Persian Empire also wanted to expand in these areas, and so a chaotic war for the northern territories began. In the end, Persia had to give up on the war because of a civil war. But the Hunnic Empire had also rebellions again. Still weakened by the war against Persia, the Huns lost many new conquered territories. But instead of reconquering the old territories, the AI decided to launch a major offense against the Persian Empire. The Huns were heavily outnumbered and ultimately failed to conquer parts of Persia. While the Huns were still recovering from the defeat, a new conflict broke out in the northern provinces. Fortunately, I was able to intervene again. Why is our Why? Is there any reason? Let's see. Hey! That doesn't make sense at all. Tax? Yeah. God damn it. It was a hard time, but I managed to defend our territory and repel the Persian invasion. Shortly afterward, surrounding tribes joined the empire. Over time, the Roman and Hunnic culture mixed together, and the language of the people was, to my surprise, Latin. But while things slowly stabilized again, new disrupting news came from the south, for the Muslim invasion had begun and was a serious foe. Oh. Hello there. But first, it was most important to reconquer the lost territories in the Roman Empire, because the Romans were doing the same. The last 3 vassals were reintegrated into the empire. Thus, the Hunnic Empire had finally reached a point of power and prosperity again, and the revenues and arms were greater than ever before. My first action was to take revenge on the Persian Empire by undertaking a minor campaign into their empire. But during this campaign, Kagan Venda II died, and his son Balamir had to continue the war. It was also important to keep the empire stable and to prevent further civil wars. Balamir was able to successfully end his father's war, but could not completely prevent the civil war. Surprisingly, it was the Hunnic vassals who rebelled, and not the Romans. However, the civil war was quickly won, and not a serious threat. Next, Kagan Balamir took care of the further expansion of the empire into new territory. But more was to follow, for not much later, Balamir set himself the goal of conquering all of Greece and driving out the Romans. Bit by bit, Roman cities were conquered, but just when everything was going well, Persian vassals declared war on me. Nevertheless, the war against Rome continued, and I finally won without having to fight any Roman legions. All of Greece was now mine. This also meant great successes for the economy, especially since I had recently become feudal and thus got even more gold. However, there was no time to lose, as Persia had already occupied parts of my land. But the outcome of this war was no longer in my hands. Despite initial difficulties, Persia was defeated, but Balamir died soon afterwards and left the empire to his son Venda III. In the meantime, the Huns no longer used the title Kagan, but only High King. The empire sank into civil war, as it had so often before, but was able to win all of them. Only Persia managed to conquer northern territories. The Huns remained passive for the next few years and made no further conquests, but I had to watch the Muslims grow stronger and stronger. When I returned to the game, we almost shared a border. I was also at war with my arch-rival Persia, who was once again trying to reclaim their old territories in what is now Turkey. But it was to get worse, because more civil wars broke out, and there was absolute chaos in the empire. Now the situation was serious, and every wrong step could mean that I would lose everything again. I started conquering enemy cities, and my allies decided to just leave me in the lurch.
Bye, have a great time.
They're just leaving. Nice. Thanks, guys. I was able to defeat the peasant uprisings quickly, but the war against my vassals was difficult because I was still at the war with Persia at the same time. But after I conquered the capital of Macedon, I was able to decide the war in my favor. With the victory in the next battle, the second war was also over. In the following battles, I was able to crush the Persian army several times. So I managed to win all of the wars and keep the empire together for the time being. In the meantime, the Muslims were almost at my border, and I was getting more and more worried because the size of their army was 72,000 men. During my absence, an old acquaintance had returned. Of course, I did not hesitate to wage war against Gethia, and after several battles and sieges, I snatched the victory. In the next few years, High King Vanda helped allies in their wars and died at the age of 66. So the time had come for High King Farah to ascend the throne. It did not take long for Macedon to rebel again, but Farah mercilessly crushed the rebels and emerged victorious from the war within a few months. Even the prisoners received no mercy. Next came a successful campaign against Asia. Under Farah, the army reached a size of almost 20,000 men. But it was once again time to switch to observe mode. In the first years, small wars for allies and small civil wars followed, but larger conquests in the north soon came. And then Farah even went so far as to dare to attack Persia again. But once again the attempt failed, and broken by this loss, Farah died a short time later. He left the future of the empire in the hands of his son Farah II. But not only that. In the meantime, the Muslims had conquered Egypt, and the Eastern Roman Empire had crumbled. Now both Roman empires had fallen, and there were only a few true Romans left. The Hunnic Empire had several internal conflicts, but fortunately the 25 years were finally over, and I could enter the game again.